Following the release of Killzone 3 in 2011, Guerrilla Games began work on a brand new IP, one that would move away from the first-person genre and give the studio a new direction for the future. Of all the ideas they'd come up with, they settled on one that had been considered the most risky of them all, not only due to its genre, but what the developers intended for it. Their plan was to create an open-world game that provided players with a multitude of different ways to tackle its many combat encounters, while also featuring a deep narrative that asked the player many questions about humanity and the future of the planet. It was certainly ambitious, yet it proved to be a major success when it was released in 2017. But now that the sequel is out, is the first game still as invigorating as when it was first released? Well, let's find out. This is Horizon Zero Dawn. Taking place on a post-apocalyptic Earth now dominated by machines, the vast majority of humanity now exists through tribal-like populations with limited access to technology and knowledge of the old world. We follow the story of Aloy, a young girl who's lived her life as an outcast and longs to find a place for herself in the world. Raised by fellow outcast Rost, Aloy seeks to become a member of the Noro tribe in the hopes of learning the identity of her birth mother. However, after Aloy finally completes her rite of passage, she and the tribe are attacked by a group of cultists, resulting in the deaths of many others, including her adoptive father. Afterwards, when Aloy awakes, one of the Nord tribe matriarchs explains that the cultists had somehow taken control of machines and are now using them for their own ends. It's here that Aloy also learns that the cultists were specifically targeting her due to her resembling a scientist from the old world. Furthermore, when she asks for the identity of her mother, she discovers that her own origins are far more complicated than she ever could have imagined. Now with danger on the horizon and a mystery to solve, Aloy ventures out into the world to find answers, not only of where she came from, but who these cultists are, why she resembles someone who's been dead for thousands of years, and how it all relates to the destruction of the old ones in Project Zero Dawn. It's certainly a complex story, but one that's told at a good pace, with the narrative taking its time and exploring each of its various regions, the people in it, and the mysteries that lay hidden throughout. Gradually you'll start to build a picture of these various societies, the old world, and what might have led to its downfall. I won't spoil the mystery for you, but I will say that it's easily one of the most horrifying apocalyptic scenarios that have been thought of for a video game. Yet amidst all its themes and commentary on mankind, the environment, and technology, Horizon is at its core a coming-of-age story, with a main protagonist trapped in a world that's constantly treating her like shit, whether in the form of other humans or through the many machines that now dominate the Earth. Through trial and error, Aloy has learned to become a self-reliant hunter, and this is reflected in both the gameplay and her character. She's more than willing to play the role of the negotiator, however she's also not going to tolerate anyone's crap if they push her too far, which happens a lot throughout the story, providing you with plenty of opportunities to humble these fools. Still, despite living a life full of hatred and negligence, Aloy has somehow been able to retain her sense of humor, and we should all be grateful for that.
Okay, how are we gonna get in? Oh, that was subtle.
Yet despite her newfound independence, at her core, Aloy is simply a girl trying to find a place to call home. She wants to prove to both herself and her people that she isn't a curse, that she's as human as all of them, which has resulted in her chasing secrets and riddles that have been buried for thousands of years. It's this innate curiosity and longing for the truth that leads her into conflict, yet it's also what helps her develop as a person. It's honestly quite inspiring to watch this woman grow throughout the story, while also being backed up by a solid supporting cast. My only wish was that Zero Dawn's villains were a bit more complex, or at the very least we got to spend some more time with them. While they each have a purpose in the story, this is one area that could have used a bit more improvement. Still, as a whole, Zero Dawn's story is a well-written odyssey that manages to feature a lot of depth and intricacies without being too overbearing, much like the gameplay. The world of Horizon is brutal, full of danger at every turn and home to a large plethora of different enemies for Aloy to fight. As such, it's imperative that the player is given all the tools necessary to effectively fight their enemies, while also providing them with the means to flee combat should it prove to be too difficult for them. Thankfully, from the moment you leave the Sacred Lands, you have access to all the gear you need to stay alive out in the wilderness, but it'll be up to you on how you use these tools in-game. It's ultimately a question of whether you want to be the hunter or the hunted. Aloy's arsenal, for example, comprises of a wide selection of different primitive weaponry which have been melded together with more advanced tech. As such, you'll want to be constantly replacing your weapons with more advanced iterations throughout the game, especially since most of your weapons are intended to be used against machines. Take your bow for instance. When you begin the game, you have access to a single bow that only allow you to use 2 kinds of ammunition. However, soon enough you'll unlock bows which can fire a wide variety of different elemental based arrows. Each of these different arrow types have the potential to affect enemies in different ways, with your accuracy being the biggest factor that will determine how effective an arrow's elemental elemental effects are. Like how using fire arrows has the potential to burn someone, but if you're able to set a blaze canister on fire, then they'll explode. You'll quickly discover that some arrow types are more effective against certain enemies than others. However, this is only the tip of the iceberg. There are all kinds of different weapons for you to use in-game. From slingshots that can launch explosives, to tripwires enhanced by the elements, to even guns that will fire concussive blasts. Aloy's arsenal of weapons is quite vast and won't take long for you to find a set of weapons that you prefer over others. Although it's best to take advantage of your large inventory to carry as many weapons on hand as possible. Considering how diverse the enemies are in this game, you never know what you might need. As a whole, the combat is typically broken up into two categories: fighting against humans and fighting against machines. And of the two, it's your human foes which are the easiest to deal with. This is mostly due to how simplistic the AI is, especially when compared to the machines. There are only a few different types of humans to deal with, and out of all of them, only those who use larger weapons or possess armor are a real threat. The rest are pretty trivial. As such, most combat encounters with humans will usually feature machines to help keep things interesting. But truth be told, fighting the humans was more of an annoyance than a genuine challenge, with the stealth segments being the only time in game that it actually felt like fun fighting them. In contrast, fighting against machines is more akin to piecing together a complex puzzle. Excluding the expansion, there are 26 distinct species of machines for you to fight, each one with its own behaviors, weaknesses, and strengths. Some can fly, possess long-range weapons, or can even turn invisible. So understanding what weapons will effectively hurt a machine and what won't is half the challenge. The rest is simply staying alive long enough to actually kill them, which is easier said than done. While in the beginning, most of the machines you encounter will be passive unless you attack first, as you explore the open world, you'll soon be face to face with machines that will actively hunt you down. Therefore, in order to survive, you'll need to be aware of all the threats around you, what resources you possess, and what actions the machines might take if and when they spot you. This is where the focus comes into play. A piece of long-forgotten technology, the focus serves as a form of limited X-ray vision for Aloy, allowing her to see machines through walls and other natural obstructions so long as it's active. Furthermore, upon seeing a machine for the first time, Aloy will acquire a detailed database of that machine's capabilities, essentially providing the player with all the necessary information about any chosen machine. But that's not all. The focus can highlight an enemy's patrol route while also highlighting any weak points in a machine's design, a feature which is also extended to the humans you encounter. The focus is the perfect tool for an aspiring hunter. It can provide you with all the information you need about any machines in your environment. With this, you'll be able to more easily set up traps, isolate targets, and remove key components from a machine. For example, many of the larger machines possess long-range weapons which can be severed from their bodies if damaged enough, after which Aloy will actually be able to use the machine's own weapons against them, effectively turning an extremely powerful gun into your own personal tool of destruction for a short time. Of course, wielding these weapons does make you move slower, meaning you're more susceptible to damage. You don't have to do it, but the game gives you the option, which when you break it down is what Horizon's combat is all about. Piecing together the most effective way to kill your enemies. This isn't like other action games where you can simply spam the same attack over and over again until you win. No, in order to succeed here, you need to get into the mindset of a hunter. It's the kind of combat that asks you to take your time rather than rushing in and hoping for the best. But with every hunt, you'll gradually get better and better at hunting machines, until eventually you'll reach such a point that you'll be able to predict what your enemy will do and how to kill them in a matter of seconds. At its best, the combat is dynamic and ever-changing, with so many ways to tackle the in-game encounters. However, should the challenge prove to be too great, then don't feel ashamed for running or hiding from your enemies. You'll learn early on that you won't last long in a straight-up fight with most machines. More often, it's best to avoid fights altogether until you're confident enough to take them on. Therefore, taking advantage of your environment is integral to staying alive, whether by staying on the high ground, running across natural terrain, or simply creeping through the underbrush. The game world is designed so you can traverse it however you wish, while also featuring a pretty simple enemy awareness system, ensuring that the player stays informed of any hostiles that have begun to notice their presence out in the open world. Of course, if you seriously want to put some distance between yourself and your enemies, then you'll want to invest in one of Horizon's more peculiar mechanics. Early on in the game, you'll unlock the override feature, which is a fancy way of turning hostile machines into your allies. While you cannot direct an overridden machine in combat, they will naturally attack any other hostile machines or humans in the area. Basically, it gives you another way to improve your chances of survival, by turning your enemy's attention towards one of its own kind. But more importantly, by overriding certain machines, Aloy will acquire a portable mount which you can then ride, which is honestly one of the coolest features of this entire game. Never before would I imagine myself riding across an apocalyptic landscape on a robotic horse, and yet here we are. The only thing that would make this cooler was if you could ride one of those giant robot T-Rexes. That being said, you can't simply override any machine right from the start of the game. Rather, in order to take control of the more powerful and dangerous machines in Horizon, you'll have to traverse the cauldrons, which are basically the dungeons of this game. Here you'll have to navigate a labyrinth of metal before finally reaching its heart. Once you've completed a cauldron, you'll unlock a myriad of rewards, including the ability to override new machines. However, it won't be easy. In fact, I'd say that the cauldrons have some of the most difficult enemy encounters in the whole game, so best to stock up on supplies before making a trip to one. Thankfully, finding supplies isn't difficult. In fact, the whole world is brimming with stuff for you to pick up and use. When it comes to resources, Horizon takes after most survival games, with Aloy being able to use whatever she can find in order to resupply herself. From parts of machines to plants and meat from animals, anything you can get your hands on has a use in game, whether it be to restock your ammo, craft traps, or pave the way to unlock new gear. Furthermore, to add an extra layer of complexity, Guerrilla also added a number of RPG elements into their game, such as skill trees and, as mentioned earlier, gear rarity. As you progress throughout the game, you'll gradually acquire skill points which you can put into unlocking new skills. These skills range from increasing your spear's damage output to allowing you to sprint without making a sound. It's all pretty self-explanatory. As for your gear, while what you start off with is serviceable, you'll gradually find the means to unlock even more powerful weapons and outfits, which can then be modified even further, allowing you to increase their damage output, improve your stealth skills, or even make you more resistant to certain elements. Of course, skill trees and gear rarity aren't the only RPG elements that Horizon tackles. There's also a choice system embedded within the game. However, its inclusion isn't about providing the player with a complex multiple choice narrative. Instead, it's meant to serve a much simpler purpose. The choices that you make throughout the game won't really affect the narrative as a whole. Rather, they serve to help the player imprint themselves on Aloy, allowing you to connect with her on a deeper level and decide what kind of person she wants to be. Granted, many of the decisions in-game can affect how some characters see you when you encounter them later, but these interactions will hold no real bearing over the story itself. Furthermore, these choices are few and far between, so don't expect to run into them as often as you might in other RPGs. It's simply another way to instill player choice without having to undermine the narrative, which is what I appreciate most about this game. Horizon Zero Dawn allows the player to approach the gameplay at their own pace. Aside from those opening hours, it doesn't hold your hand and force you down a set path. Rather, it encourages you to tackle the story whenever you wish, while also enticing the player with new gear or XP should they complete any of the side content. With how large the open world is, you can easily spend hours just wandering about admiring all the lovely scenery, tracking down collectibles along the way. If you want to test your traversal skills, then seeking out a tall neck is guaranteed to provide you with the thrill of climbing a massive machine, while also forcing you to carefully navigate a hostile environment just to climb onto the damn thing. Still, it's worth it just to repel off these behemoths. Uncovering part of the map is just a bonus. If you want a challenge, then the hunting lodges can provide the player with a nice test of their skills. Otherwise, you can always attempt to tackle one of the larger machines. Just be careful not to bite off more than you can chew. Of course, if the main game isn't enough of a challenge for you, then perhaps you'll be ready for a detour into the frozen wilds. Released in November of 2017, the Frozen Wilds expansion brings Aloy to a new region of the open world with a new host of machines to fight. There she'll encounter the Banuk tribe, learn of their history and their own connection to the old ones. It's a pretty simple setup and one that integrates itself nicely with the main game, featuring its own separate narrative that can take place whenever you're ready to make the journey. However, due to it being scaled for a player that is at least level 30, it's highly recommended that you wait until you're properly leveled before attempting to tackle this expansion. Still, even then, you may find the DLC to be more difficult than anything in the base game. The Frozen Wilds is clearly tailored for someone who's experienced the endgame of Horizon. It's full of combat encounters that will quickly overwhelm you if you're not prepared. Thanks in no small part to the new demonic machines, these enemies are far more aggressive than those found in the base game, with many of them even possessing new elemental attacks. Furthermore, there are now control towers throughout the Frozen Wilds which can heal any hostile machines close to them. These can be destroyed or overridden, however attacking them will alert the machines of your presence. So like I've said before, best to weigh your options before just rushing in to fight. With just a few simple additions, Guerrilla has found new ways to test the player's skill in game. Still, with the expansion comes a whole host of new stuff for Aloy to unlock, from an entire new branch of skills to new weapon upgrades and gear, so there's plenty of reason to take on the challenge aside from a new piece of story content. That being said, the narrative we're given here is as well written as the main game story, with its own mysteries and revelations to uncover about the world of Horizon, while also providing us with a deep look into how religion is tackled in a world dominated by machines. To put it it simply, there's a lot to like about the frozen wilds. It provides the player with plenty of challenge and new content to sink their teeth into, with the added benefit of being available right from the beginning. That is if you're insane enough to even attempt it at that point. If nothing else, it's a good reason to dive back into this game and enjoy some more of its wonderful music. Composed by Joris de Man, Horizon is a game that somehow manages to blend many different themes and ideas into one very complex cocktail. As such, the soundtrack is meant to reflect these various ideas, often combining them to form some very unique sounds. From the more traditional chanting and religious sounding themes, to techno-based synth mixed with more conventional instruments. The music of Horizon is able to perfectly evoke the subtlety of its characters and provide a haunting backdrop to the imagery present in the game world, all the while being reminiscent of the beautiful landscape, the power present in the machines, and the mysterious nature of the old ones. It's simply a perfect soundtrack, one that's hard to forget. This wicked blend of nature and technology is also carried over into the sound design. Thanks to the open world, you'll often find yourself in a situation where more naturally created sounds are often accompanied by some otherwise unnatural sounds. Like the simple tune of running water conducted alongside a herd of machines drilling into the earth, often reminding you of nature's bounty and how the world we once knew has become dominated by a new form of life that knows no hunger. It's honestly quite enthralling to see such serene landscapes accompanied by a symphony of mechanized melodies. For a game that came out in 2017, it's still able to outshine most modern games when it comes to its visuals. Utilizing the Decima engine, Horizon features a wide range of different environments, each of which seamlessly blend natural locales and man-made structures, allowing Horizon's world to feel rich with life despite a vast majority of the population being lifeless machines. From deserts to forests, massive snow-covered mountains, and vast city ruins, the level of detail found in this game is simply staggering, which when combined with some expertly designed lighting and weather effects makes every part of the open world feel alive. This insane dedication to environmental storytelling is also extended to the design of Horizon's characters. There's a carefully crafted divide between those who found their place in the world and people like Aloy who haven't. From the way they present themselves to our protagonists to the way they're animated in-game, every bit of detail helps convey who these people are, what they're capable of, and what they've experienced before they've even said a word to you. It's quite impressive to see how much effort the developers have put into making sure our protagonist supporting cast not only stands out, but fits perfectly into this world that they've created. Of course, when it comes to ranking characters by design, it's the machines which are the real stars of Horizon. The sheer complexity put into every single one of your autonomous foes is quite astonishing. It's not enough to provide the player with a mechanized foe to fight, but knowing that you can tear them apart and reveal their innards underneath is quite jarring. I can't begin to imagine how much work must have gone in to make sure every machine in this game not only looks good, but is capable of moving in a believable yet terrifying way. Guerrilla didn't hold back when it came to this game's visuals, and we should all be grateful for that. For a studio that's worked primarily on first-person shooters, I'm quite impressed with what Guerrilla Games has accomplished here. Horizon Zero Dawn is one of the best open-world games Sony has published in recent years. Its map is large enough for the player to lose themselves in without it needing to be overstuffed with content. The graphics are stellar, with the environment and character models looking superb, while the combat itself features some of the most intricate and difficult boss encounters you can find in an action game. It has a lengthy expansion which provides the player with plenty of new content, all the while being backed up by one hell of a soundtrack. Simply put, Horizon Zero Dawn is a damn good game, and I honestly can't wait to see what Guerrilla has in store for the sequel. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. I'm the Grave Tender, and thank you for joining me on the other side. Please consider subscribing, and I hope you all have a nice day.